It was early morning in Portland, Oregon, when I first began to sense something was off. The city was still quiet, and I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when David walked in. For once, he was dressed in a suit. I hadn't seen him in anything other than sweatpants and old shirts since he lost his job as an IT specialist a few months back. Big day, I asked, trying to sound casual. David looked up, his face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Yeah, I have a job interview today. Fingers crossed. I smiled, though my mind was already buzzing. It had been a while since we had any news that wasn't just about scraping by. But as I looked at David, something felt uneasy. His sudden enthusiasm felt too rehearsed, too out of place. The day dragged on, and as evening fell, I found myself waiting anxiously for him to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I could tell something was wrong. The sharp scent of alcohol and an unfamiliar perfume clung to him. My heart sank. David stumbled slightly as he hung up his coat, and I could see the disheveled state of his hair and clothes. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my instincts were screaming at me. I had to know what was going on. Later that night, while David was in the shower, I found myself in his study. I hesitated for a moment before picking up his phone. It was a risk, but I needed answers. With shaking hands, I scrolled through his messages, and there it was, a string of texts between David and Rebecca, my closest friend. The messages were intimate and full of promises that I had never heard before. Rebecca was someone I trusted deeply. We had been friends for years, shared countless secrets, and supported each other through thick and thin. And now, here she was, betraying me with my own husband. I felt a cold fury rising inside me, mingled with a sense of betrayal so profound it left me almost numb. David had used my business credit card to buy gifts for Rebecca. There were receipts for luxury items, which I later found stashed in his desk drawer. He had been financing their affair with the money I had earned, money that was supposed to secure our family's future. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Ella, our 8-year-old daughter, was asleep in the next room, unaware of the storm brewing just outside her door. I worried about her, about how this would affect her. She was perceptive, mature for her age. I knew she would sense the tension, and that thought made my heart ache. Weeks passed, and I tried to keep up appearances. I focused on work and Ella's routine, but in the background, I was quietly gathering evidence. I followed David one day and saw him with Rebecca at a high-end store, laughing and shopping together. The sight was a cruel confirmation of what I had already discovered. During this time, my brother Mark came to visit. He had always been my rock, and his presence was a much-needed comfort. Mark was completely unaware of the affair. He had come to help with Ella while I juggled work and the emotional turmoil. One evening, while Mark was playing with Ella, I took the opportunity to confront David. My hands trembled as I spoke, but I needed him to know that I was no longer in the dark. David, still in denial, tried to deflect, but I had already seen too much. Ella knows something is wrong, I said, my voice breaking. She's been talking to Mark. She's worried. David's face paled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But then he masked it with anger. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. But I knew the truth, and as painful as it was, I had to protect Ella. The holidays were approaching, and I decided it was time to take action. With Mark's help, I began packing up our things. The plan was to move to a new home with Ella and start fresh. The night before David was supposed to leave for a getaway with Rebecca, I knew I had to confront him one last time. I was determined, resolute. I had to find a way to end this chapter of my life and ensure that Ella and I could move forward, free from the shadows of betrayal that had loomed over us for too long. The suspense was unbearable, but the truth was clear. It was time for a new beginning. The days that followed my discovery were filled with a constant, gnawing anxiety. I kept everything on a tight leash, trying to maintain normalcy for Ella's sake. Meanwhile, the plan to leave David was taking shape, and I couldn't wait for the right moment to put it into action. The night before David was set to leave for his getaway with Rebecca, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to confront him about the affair. The truth couldn't stay hidden any longer, and I needed him to know that I was fully aware of his betrayal. As David came home that evening, I could see he was excited about the trip. His bags were packed, and he was chattering about how much fun he expected to have. I tried to keep my composure, though inside, my emotions were a tangled mess. "Are you sure you don't need anything else?" I asked, trying to sound casual. David barely looked up. "Nope, I think I'm all set. Can you make sure Ella's in bed by the time I leave?" I nodded, fighting the urge to reveal what I knew. As he busied himself with last-minute preparations, I made my way to the bedroom where I had hidden all the evidence, receipts, messages, and records of his lavish spending on Rebecca. When David was finally ready to leave, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath and called him into the living room. "David, we need to talk." His face tightened with a mix of irritation and curiosity. "What's this about?" I sat down, feeling the weight of my next words. "I know about you and Rebecca. I know you've been using my business credit card to pay for things for her. I saw the messages on your phone, and I followed you the other day." David's expression shifted from annoyance to shock. "Jessica, Save it," I interrupted. "I've seen enough. I don't need any more excuses. I'm done with this." His face flushed with a mixture of guilt and anger. "You don't understand. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I thought." "No," I said firmly. "You made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences." David tried to backpedal, offering hollow apologies and justifications. "Please, Jess, don't do this. I was going to end things with Rebecca. I just needed more time." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. Ella's already noticed that something's wrong. I can't let her be exposed to this any longer." His eyes widened in alarm. "Ella knows." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "She's been asking questions and talking to my brother. She knows enough to understand that something is deeply wrong." David slumped into a chair, clearly defeated. "What are you going to do?" "I'm moving out," I said. "Tomorrow. I've already made arrangements with Mark. We're going to start over." David's face was a mix of panic and desperation. "Can't we work this out? I'll get help. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head. "No, David. This is over. I've made up my mind." With that, I stood up and walked towards the bedroom. I could hear David's frustrated mutterings as I left, but I didn't turn back. I had to remain strong, not just for myself but for Ella. That night, while David sulked in the guest room, I went to bed with a heavy heart. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to take control of my life. The following day, Mark arrived early to help with the move. He had a look of quiet resolve as he packed up our belongings, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos. Ella, oblivious to the full extent of what was happening, was busy with her toys, her innocent laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding around her. David tried to reach out to me multiple times during the day, pleading and bargaining, but I remained resolute. I had deactivated my business credit card and made sure to secure our finances before David could get his hands on any more of my money. By evening, the house was almost empty. Mark and I had packed up everything we needed and were ready to leave. David, still furious and desperate, tried to stop us, but I refused to be swayed. As I packed the last of Ella's things into the car, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. This chapter of my life was closing, and though it was painful, it was also a step towards a new beginning. The confrontation had been tough, but it was necessary. As we drove away from our old home, I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart heavy but hopeful. I was leaving behind the pain and betrayal, determined to start fresh and build a better future for Ella and me. The first few days after moving out were a whirlwind of emotions and logistics. Mark and I found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood of Portland, one that felt like a fresh start. It was a far cry from the home we'd left behind, but it had a warmth and simplicity that I hoped would ease the transition for Ella. The day after we moved in, David's calls and messages started pouring in. Each one was a mixture of desperation and anger. He wanted to know why I'd cut him off financially and demanded to see Ella. I couldn't bear to see him or hear his voice, so I ignored his calls and focused on making our new place feel like home. Mark was a huge help, handling the heavy lifting and keeping things calm. He made sure Ella felt comfortable and secure in her new environment, setting up her room and playing with her. His presence was a source of strength, and I was grateful for his support during this difficult time. Despite the chaos, I tried to keep Ella's routine as normal as possible. I enrolled her in a new school nearby and started to introduce her to the neighborhood. She was adjusting well, but I could tell she missed the familiarity of her old life. I tried to reassure her with extra cuddles and bedtime stories, doing everything I could to keep her spirits up. A few weeks after the move, I received an unexpected call from Rebecca. It was late one evening, and I was tucking Ella into bed when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jessica, it's Rebecca," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I need to talk to you." "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm angry, Jessica," she said. "David's things were sent to my house, and now my husband knows everything. We're getting a divorce." "You made sure of that." I could hear the hurt and anger in her voice, and a part of me felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, Rebecca. But you and David made your choices. I had to protect myself and Ella." Rebecca's voice softened slightly. "I didn't expect David to drag me into all this. I was hoping we could figure things out. But now everything is falling apart." I could tell she was struggling, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of empathy. "I hope you find a way to move forward. It's not easy for any of us." We ended the call shortly after, leaving me with a sense of mixed emotions. While I felt justified in my actions, the reality of the situation was sobering. Rebecca was dealing with her own fallout, and the mess David had created was affecting more lives than just ours. As days turned into weeks, the complications continued. David kept calling and sending messages, each more frantic than the last. He threatened legal action, claiming I was depriving him of his parental rights. I was prepared for such threats and had consulted a lawyer to ensure that Ella's well-being was legally protected. One afternoon, while I was working from home, my lawyer called with an update. "Jessica, I've reviewed David's claims. He's trying to contest the custody arrangements, but given the circumstances and his recent behavior, it's unlikely he'll succeed." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for handling this. I just want to focus on Ella and give her a stable environment." "That's the right approach," my lawyer assured me. "Keep documenting everything, and we'll get through this." Despite the legal battles, life slowly began to settle into a new routine. Ella and I attended local events, made new friends, and started to find our rhythm. I continued working hard at my job, determined to keep my career on track while providing for my daughter. One evening, as I was finishing up some paperwork, Mark came by for a visit. He brought dinner and, more importantly, a reassuring presence. "How's everything going?" he asked, setting down the bags of food. "Busy but manageable," I replied. "Ella seems to be settling in well. I think she's finally starting to feel more at home here." Mark smiled. "That's good to hear. I'm glad you're making progress." As we sat down to eat, I reflected on the journey so far. The confrontation with David had been necessary, but it had set off a chain reaction of challenges and adjustments. I was navigating a new life, one that was filled with uncertainties, but also with hope. The holidays were approaching, and I was determined to make them special for Ella. We decorated our apartment with festive lights and ornaments, creating a cozy and cheerful atmosphere. I wanted her to have a sense of joy and normalcy during this time of transition. As the season changed and the new year approached, I felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead would still have its hurdles, but I was ready to face them head on. With Mark's support and my determination, I was building a new foundation for Ella and me, one step at a time. The aftermath of David's betrayal had been challenging, but it was also a time of growth and resilience. I was learning to navigate this new chapter in my life, committed to providing a better future for my daughter while standing strong in the face of adversity. As the new year began, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The legal issues were gradually settling down, and the apartment was becoming more like home with each passing day. Ella was adjusting well, and I was determined to make sure our lives were as stable and happy as possible. David's calls had become less frequent, and I had managed to cut off all financial ties with him. I had made it clear that I would no longer entertain any discussions about reconciliation or financial support. It was time for both of us to move on. The focus now was on rebuilding our lives and finding a sense of normalcy. One afternoon, I received an unexpected letter from David's lawyer. It was an official notice of his intent to contest the custody arrangement. My heart sank as I read the words, feeling a wave of anxiety. I had hoped we could avoid further legal battles, but it seemed David was determined to fight. I immediately contacted my lawyer to discuss the situation. "Jessica, don't worry," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "We've anticipated this move. We have strong evidence of your commitment to Ella's well-being, and the court will take that into account." Despite her reassurance, the process was draining. I spent countless hours gathering documents, reviewing records, and preparing for the court hearings. Mark remained my rock throughout this ordeal, offering emotional support and practical help. He attended meetings with me and helped care for Ella, making sure I could focus on the legal aspects of the case. The court hearings were tense and emotionally charged. David's lawyer argued that I was trying to deprive him of his parental rights, but I presented my evidence showing that my primary concern was Ella's stability and well-being. I highlighted David's past behavior and the negative impact it had on our family. During one particularly difficult hearing, David took the stand. He looked worn and defeated, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of sadness and relief. As he spoke, it became clear that his attempts to justify his actions were falling short. The court saw through his attempts to manipulate the situation. The turning point came when the judge ruled in my favor, affirming the custody arrangement and recognizing my commitment to providing a stable environment for Ella. I felt a profound sense of relief as the decision was announced. It was a victory, but it was also a reminder of the hard road we had traveled. With the custody issue resolved, I turned my focus back to rebuilding our lives. Ella and I continued to settle into our new routine, and I worked hard to create a positive environment for her. We started participating in local activities, joined a community center, and made new friends. One evening, as Ella and I decorated for the next holiday, she looked up at me with a bright smile. "Mom, I really like our new home. It feels so warm and happy." My heart swelled with pride and relief. "I'm glad, sweetheart. I want us to be happy and to make the most of this new chapter in our lives." Ella hugged me tightly, and in that moment, I knew we had made it through the toughest part. Despite the challenges and heartbreak, we were moving forward and finding our own path to happiness. As for David and Rebecca, their lives continued to unravel. Rebecca's marriage had ended, and David struggled with the consequences of his actions. They faced their own set of difficulties, but that was no longer my concern. My focus was on Ella and building a future that was full of hope and possibility. The final months of the year brought a sense of closure and renewal. I finalized the divorce, secured child support, and continued to advance in my career. The apartment was now a place of comfort and security, a symbol of our new beginning. Looking back, I could see how far we had come. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had also been a period of profound growth and resilience. I had learned to stand up for myself and protect what mattered most. Through the heartbreak and adversity, I had found a renewed sense of self-respect and determination. As I tucked Ella into bed one night, I reflected on our journey. We've been through a lot, haven't we? Ella nodded sleepily. Yeah, but we're doing great, Mom. I love our new life. I kissed her goodnight and smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We had faced the storms and come out stronger. The future was still uncertain, but it was full of promise and opportunity. With Ella by my side and the support of those who cared for us, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to shape. As I closed the door to her room, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that we had truly begun a new chapter in our lives.